of here.
That's not gonna help.
This thing has latched itself to your family.
Starting off at our number 5 spot, The Exorcist. This is said to be the best horror film of all time, that it's hard to believe it's based off of a true story. The movie came out in 1973, and it's about an innocent girl who became possessed by a demon. Her mother then contacts a priest who confirms that she is in fact possessed. Then the top priest who can actually deal with an exorcism is called to save the girl from the demon inside her. This movie is based off the terrifying novel written by William Peter Blatty. William was also the screenwriter for this film, seeing as it was a movie based off his novel. William based the novel of the film on a Washington Post article from 1949. The headline of this article was "Priest Frees Mount Rainier Boy Reported Held in Devil's Grip." The article then explained how 4 priests participated in the rite of exorcism on a boy. According to the priest, they allegedly experienced the boy speaking in tongues, the bed shaking and hovering, and objects flying around during the exorcism. Also, a little fun fact for you guys, there are actually a series of ominous events that took place surrounding this year-long shoot on the movie. This included the death of 9 people associated with production, also 2 of the actors died before the film's release, and then there's the story of a mysterious fire that destroyed the set one weekend. Not to mention all of the accidents and injuries that happened on set while filming. In at number 4, The Amityville Horror. This movie came out in 1979, and it's about a young family who moves into a house where murder was committed. While there, they experience strange and terrifying occurrences. The real horror story happened in 1976 to the Lutz family. This family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. What they didn't know about this house was that 13 months before they moved in, a man named Ronald Delfro Jr. brutally murdered his family in this home. While in their new home, this family experienced some pretty paranormal things, such as red eyes appearing in the kitchen window, and even blood and slime dripping down from their walls. They didn't want to stick around to see what other scary things would happen, so within a month they moved out of the house and the small town of Amityville, New York altogether. At number 3, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie came out in 1974. In it, we have 2 teenage siblings along with 3 of their friends, and they are driving on the outback roads of Texas to go visit their grandfather's grave. Through the movie, they end up at the home of a terrifying, murderous, cannibalistic family. In the family, we get introduced to Leatherface, who is a chainsaw-wielding maniac who wears a leather mask on his face. And what's really scary about this character is that he was actually based off of a real person. That person was serial killer Ed Gein. Ed grew up with a very controlling, domineering, and religious mother. After her death, Ed began to act on his morbid fascination with the female body. He ended up going to a graveyard and digging up recently buried female corpses. He would then dissect the bodies, but keep the sexual organs, and would make suits out of the skins. He soon desired more than grave robbing, and he began to murder middle-aged women who looked similar to his mother. Coming in at number 2, Annabelle. The movie Annabelle came out somewhat recently in 2014. It's a prequel to The Conjuring, and it's about a couple who begin to experience terrifying supernatural occurrences involving a vintage doll. Shortly after, their home is invaded by a sadistic spirit, so they call paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren to help them. So you might be thinking, a movie about a possessed doll, how scary can that be? Well, what if I told you this film was based on a true story? Yeah, that kinda ups the creep factor, doesn't it? The doll in the film was hit with some movie magic, and it's portrayed much creepier looking than the actual doll that was involved in these supernatural occurrences. The actual haunted doll is a Raggedy Ann doll, but like I said, this movie is actually based off of a true story. Ed and Lorraine are both real people who have helped with thousands of paranormal investigations. The Warrens say that the original Annabelle began her reign of terror in 1970, after being purchased in a hobby shop by a mother as a gift for her daughter. As soon as the doll made it into the house, the weird occurrences started to begin. The daughter first said that she saw the doll levitate. Then both the mother and daughter claimed the doll attacked them and even attempted to strangle a family friend. The Warrens were called, and they diagnosed the doll as an inhuman demonic spirit. They then took the doll to their museum in Connecticut for safekeeping. She is kept in a glass box that is sealed with a key, ritualistic prayers, and holy water. About this, Lorraine said she has a priest come and bless the museum and use prayers that bind the evil spirits. Coming in at number 1, The Conjuring. Yes, this terrifying movie is actually based off of true events. So if you haven't seen this film, basically it's about a husband and a wife who are also paranormal investigators. Their names are Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yes, the same Ed and Lorraine Warren from the Annabelle case. And they are trying to help a family that's being terrorized by a dark presence in their farmhouse. So Ed and Lorraine go to the house, and once there, they discover the land is covered with a satanic haunting. And these spirits are targeting the Perrin family wherever they go. Not only has this movie been deemed one of the scariest movies of all time, as I said, this movie was based off of real life events. It came out in 2013, but the actual events took place in the 70s. So back in 1971, Ed and Lorraine Warren helped a family named the Perrins who had just moved into a Rhode Island farmhouse and experienced experience ghosts and terrifying occurrences. After the movie came out, the real-life Andrea Perron said that The Conjuring was a fair reflection of the chaos and danger that the family faced on the farm. She said there were liberties taken and a few discrepancies, but overall, it was what it claimed to be. Also, to make this film as true to the real-life events as they could, director James Wan asked Lorraine Warren to join the project as a consultant. The film was mostly inspired by her and her husband's case files and recordings dealing with the Perron's family haunting. The entire Perron family was also said to have put their support behind the film. It's so crazy to think that the things that happened in this terrifying film actually happened to people in real life.
Number 5. Kevin. Numerous cases of kids who report memories of previous lives have been studied over the last 50 years. James Leonenger is an American man who, at the tender age of only 2, began having extreme nightmares of a fiery plane crash. Scary. He then described to his parents about being an American fighter pilot who perished when his plane was shot down during World War II. He gave details that included names of American aircraft carriers, first and last names of friends on the ship with him, and a location around him where he believes his plane went down. At 2. Yeah, just 2 years old. A couple things here. Do 2-year-olds even know what or how planes work? This kid's rifling off coordinates like he's dropping in after the gulag. This is wild. Apparently they were at a museum of aircrafts when Kevin's visions and dreams really took off, pun intended. I mean, maybe he was just fascinated by planes. You know how kids get, right? They like stuff like that. Apparently he went on to tell his parents that he had flown a plane called the Corsair, which took him off a boat called the Natoma, to which they had no idea what he was talking about. James's father decided to do some research of his own. He discovered that there had been a small escort carrier named the Natoma Bay, which had been in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Yo, this kid's giving you drop coordinates, he's IDing planes, that should be enough proof, no? Hey, you better salute your own son and thank him for his service, holy moly. Research proved that there was an actual pilot named James Huston. His plane did get hit by Japanese fire, and it was in 1945. I think that's enough proof we need that reincarnations are real. He's gonna be really good at Call of Duty as well, you know? Number 4, Andrew. In 2014, the parents of a young Andrew Lucas began suspecting that their beloved son may be possessed or even have some sort of ghost inside him. This happened after Andrew started crying almost non-stop, asking why he would continuously claim that his parents let him die in a fire. When his mother, Michelle, asked him what fire he was talking about, Andrew started telling her of details about his past life as a US Marine. Hold on. Apparently this happens way more than I thought. This is like really common amongst youngins, you know that, right? Eventually, Mom used these details to uncover the story of a US Marine Sergeant Val Lewis, who died in an explosive attack in Lebanon in 1983. The details of what happened to Lewis and the story Andrew told her were too similar to let pass. Mom decided to take the issue to the TV show Ghost Inside My Child, to which Andrew was given several photographs of military men to look at. He then stopped and zoomed in on one image of Sergeant Val Lewis. Michelle then took her son to Lewis's gravesite in Georgia, to which Andrew laid some flowers. Aww. And this is also probably really jarring for her son, so he's a brave guy, you know? I mean, the images of war in that young man's head, that's gotta be scary for the little guy, you know? Also for Mom, those are hard words hearing from your son. He apparently ran right to the grave, pointing to the name on it saying, "That's my friend." The grave also belonged to a fallen member of the Marine Corps. Now, since it was on a TV show, my first gut feeling is to not really believe this. Apparently, it's been rumored also to be a hoax and is still under investigation if the boy's information was all correct. But for the most part, it seems like maybe the idea of reincarnation just is still blocked by some theorists from actually exploring the idea. I don't know. I kind of believe it, you know? It's scary. Number 3, Anne Frank. Wait a minute, like Anne Frank? Yeah. Apparently Swedish-born Barbro Karlin, who at a young age felt like she wasn't really herself. Born in Sweden in 1954, 9 years after Anne Frank died, she felt like she didn't really fit in. Her parents dismissed her on being called Anne and thought it was pretty weird, a drastic name change from Barbara to Anne. She apparently consistently asked her parents to where her, quote, real parents were, which is terrifying on its own and also really sad. That would be hard to hear as a parent. As Barbara Karlin made her way through school, she was introduced to Anne Frank in class during the 1960s. Like many students learning about the Holocaust and concentration camps for the first time, Barbara was shocked upon hearing Frank's story. She was stunned at how much she found in common with what she was reading. As she and her family were vacationing in Amsterdam, Anne Frank's story was well known worldwide. The secret annex she called home had now been transformed into a museum. Barbara apparently showed her parents the quick shortcuts to get to the Anne Frank house, upon which it all clicked. As she visited the home, she was apparently transported back in time. Her story even led to her meeting Anne Frank's cousin. He was skeptical at first, not sharing anything about him or the family, but oddly enough, he said that only the family would have known what they talked about. After their meeting one-on-one, the man believed she really was the reincarnation of his long-lost cousin. Spooky, okay. I wonder if they do a 23andMe test if it would show your related family. I did that ancestry spit tube and all my cousins are actually all my cousins, so who knows? Number 2, the fourth. In 1996, Sonam Wangdu was just another happy-go-lucky kid. Cartoons, Power Rangers, you know, kid stuff. It's the 90s. However, Sonam was anything but an ordinary child. Apparently to this day, he is recognized and revered by the Buddhist community in Nepal and Tibet as a very important reincarnation, the new Lama. Growing up in Seattle, the boy agreed he would travel to Kathmandu for education and afterwards he would live in the monastery. He was given the name Trulkula, which means reincarnation in Tibetan. Now, the spooky scary part. Deshung Rinpoche III moved to Seattle in 1960 after military took over Tibet and taught at the University of Washington. He was said to be a reincarnation of the original Deshung Rinpoche who lived in Tibet in the 19th century. Before he died, he told his students that he would be reborn in the Seattle area. While pregnant with Trulkula, Carolyn Lama, aka Mum, had dreams and received signs that she interpreted as evidence her child would be born as a reincarnation. The boy's father, sadly, who perished in a traffic accident in 1993, also had similar dreams. Of the hundreds of lamas said to be in reincarnations in the Tibetan Buddhist faith, apparently only a couple have come from the West. Mum and the boy underwent several interviews in Seattle before Trulkula was brought to Nepal before being formally enthroned in a ceremony attended by thousands of people. He now goes by Deshung Rinpoche IV. This is wild. I'm shook right now. This is awesome. Look it up. I'm kind of freaking out right now. This is a pretty significant event right here. And number 1, Arthur Flourdough. James Arthur Flourdough, great name, was born in England in 1906 where he grew up and lived a pretty normal life. He never left the UK and wasn't fond on traveling much. At about 12, he began to have strange recurring dreams and hallucinations over time, crystallizing into a very clear and vivid image. His dreams were riddled with stone cities carved into cliffs, surrounded by deserts. He didn't really understand what it all meant. There was temples, streets, lanes, structures, as well as a huge boulder just outside this place he was picturing. Desolate desert wasteland daydreams turned into nightmares. One day he was struck with a vivid hallucination of being in the desert in a busy city. So real yet so foreign. He grew up, he grew old, and only ever leaving England once to go to the French coast, the dreams of that mysterious stone city always continued. Arthur one day was watching a documentary on the BBC, and it featured a segment on the ancient city of Petra in Jordan. Arthur nearly fainted. It all came rushing back to him. This was the city that he had always seen. He called the BBC and, scoffing him off as a hoax, they asked to interview him. Even archaeological experts and a world-class authority on Petra quizzed him extensively, and he nailed each question with ease, even correcting experts on some of their research. The Jordanian government even invited him to come out to Jordan, where he continued to baffle experts. Flourdough was able to immediately find his way around the city without a guide or even a map, giving precise details on landmarks and even pointing out sites that had not been discovered or dug up yet. This is real, like 100% real. He had no interest or motive behind this, he was just having weird dreams. Like something itchy on your brain finally scratched, you know? Number 5, the Octavius. The Octavius became more than just a legend in 1775 when a whaling ship named the Herald found it aimlessly drifting off the coast of Greenland. The scary part? With all of its crew frozen dead by the Arctic cold's mist and winds. To add to the spookiness, the ship's captain was even found sitting at his desk with a logbook in front of him, finishing a log entry from 1762. The Octavius was a legendary 18th century ghost ship. According to the story, the three-masted schooner was found west of Greenland, boarded as a derelict. The 5-man boarding party found the entire crew of 28 below deck, completely frozen solid and almost perfectly preserved. The captain's body was supposedly slouched over the table in his cabin, pen in hand, with the captain's log in front of him. In his cabin, there were also the bodies of a woman and a boy covered with a blanket, and a sailor with a tinderbox in his hand trying to stay warm. The boarding party took only the captain's log before leaving the vessel, trying not to touch the remains or evidence of what possibly could have been the reason for the lost ship at sea. The last entry from the logbook was November 11th, 1762, which meant that the ship had been lost in the Arctic for 13 years. Can you imagine? 13 years of just traveling the Arctic, sailing slowly while frozen bodies lay still on board as a ghost ship? Yo, that's just like terrifying, okay? Like seeing a ghost ship sail up beside you from the fog, crystallized in frozen ice with the horrors that lay below the deck. Very sad, but also very scary, you know? Number 4, the SS Valencia. Side note, if you like what we do here, make sure you always Hulk smash that like button or throw a comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Let us know what other ghost ships you know of, and I'll check them out for a part 2 or maybe even a part 3. Speaking of more ghost ships, the SS Valencia is one of the creepier ship stories. Pulling up and finding a completely abandoned ship is scary enough. Those are people's lives lost. It's scary stuff. The SS Valencia was an American iron-hulled passenger steamer built for service in 1882 by William Cramp and Sons. It did many things. In 1897, the Valencia was attacked by a Spanish cruiser, Reina Mercedes, just off the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. They tried to sink her, but nope. She was built strong, and she survived. A year later, she became a passenger liner for the US West Coast, where she served in the Spanish-American War as a troop ship during the conflict. Eventually, after her service, the Valencia was wrecked off of Cape Beale, the west coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, on January 22nd, 1906, as her sinking unfortunately took 100 passengers with her. Some classify the wreck of the Valencia as the worst maritime disaster in, quote, the graveyard of the Pacific, which is a famously known treacherous area off the southwest coast of Vancouver Island. That's a horrible nickname for a shallow area also, right? Like, the graveyard? That's horrible. 6 months after the sinking, a local fisherman and his wife reported seeing a lifeboat with 8 skeletons in a nearby sea cave at the shoreline of Pachena Bay. The cave was reported to be around 200 feet deep. There was no definite explanation for the lifeboat's presence in the cave, but due to the dangerous seas outside the cave's mouth, the lifeboat along with its human remains couldn't be recovered. Local fishermen similarly report lifeboats being rowed by skeletons of the Valencia's victims just offshore as well. Most famous sighting was a rescue ship named the Topeka. Some observers on board, who were survivors of the just sunken Valencia, claimed, while sailing home with the survivors, a ship approached from the fog, and the ship passing was the just sank Valencia. The crew on board apparently now all skeletons. Yo, I'm getting the Curse of the Black Pearl vibes right now, are you? Like, that's scary, scary. Number 3, the Mary Celeste. We've heard about her. One of the most famous real-life ghost ships, of course, is the mystery of the Mary Celeste. And I say mystery because it's still a mystery. She was found drifting slowly through the waters of the Atlantic Ocean in 1872, sailing completely unharmed and untouched with all its sails still up, the crew's personal belongings intact, and a cargo of more than 1,700 barrels of booze untouched. She set sail from New York City with more than 1,700 full barrels of alcohol destined for Italy for distribution. On board were 10 people, including Captain Briggs, his wife, and their daughter. Over the next 2 weeks, the ship encountered, well, something bizarre. 10 days later, the vessel was spotted by a British brig, De Gratia. The crew from that ship boarded the Mary Celeste and discovered it deserted. Yeah, no crew. Spooky. First thing I'm thinking is Bermuda Triangle. Always, always, always. Ghost ships, anything lost at sea, Bermuda Triangle, immediately. But apparently a British ship found the Mary Celeste on December 4th, 1872, near the Strait of Gibraltar. It's alright, so not the Bermuda Triangle then? No? Alright. Yeah, it couldn't have been pirates either, because apparently they like to drink stuff. It was apparently late reaching Italy, and this British ship went out looking for her, confused where she had gotten lost. The strangeness comes with the boarding. Below deck, things looked completely normal. Absolutely no signs of attack or struggle. The only things missing were one lifeboat and the captain's logbook, and most importantly, the entire crew. Theories of crew mutiny, weather phenomenons like giant water spouts, or even consumption of poisonous foods came into play. After passing Santa Maria Island, the Azores, on November 25, 1872, there were no more entries. Devoid of all crew, but strangely stocked to the nines with food and booze and all of the crew's personal belongings like jewelry and clothes. With no clear explanation, the Mary Celeste remains one of the most puzzling ghost ships around. They still have no idea what happened to those people. After the salvage hearings, Mary Celeste continued in service under new owners, but in 1885, her captain deliberately wrecked her off the coast of Haiti as part of an attempted insurance fraud. Number 2. Lady Lovabond. A ghostly story of lust, love, jealousy, and rage. The dark history of this haunted love boat. In 1748, the day before Valentine's Day, it was set to sail as a celebration of the ship's captain's wedding. On February 13th, 1748, the ship contained by the newly married Simon Peel was carrying his new wife Annetta and their wedding guests from London to Oporto, Portugal. Unknown to the captain, his first mate Rivers was also in love with Annetta, and in a fit of insane jealousy, seized the helm after murdering the helmsman and deliberately steered the ship towards the Goodwin Sands, where it ran aground, cracking the ship in half and unfortunately drowning everybody on board. And there, the story might have ended, had it not been witnessed for all the claims to have seen the ghostly ship appear every 50 years. Some of them even passing close enough to hear the sounds of celebration. Apparently on the 13th of February, the Edenbridge spots Lady Lovabond's ship exactly 50 years later. It was reported seen by ship captain James Westlake, and according to his testimony, he almost collided with the ship before he could finally turn the steering wheel to avoid the collision. Dude, close call, just shows up out of nowhere? Like, what? He also recorded in his logbook the ship was headed straight for the Goodwin Sands. Other sightings have been reported at 50-year intervals, except for 1984, when the ship failed to materialize. 1798, 1848, 1898, and 1948 witnessed the ship's sightseeings. Even some boats sent out rescuers, assuming that it was in distress or lost at sea, but later it could never be found. Yo. A tale as old as time, huh? Jealousy, that'll do it. Yep, always does. And number 1, the Flying Dutchman. In all maritime folklore, this ghost ship has left quite an impact like no other. It's the ghost ship, the oldest one in the book. Well, maybe not the oldest, but definitely the most prolific and well known. The Pirates of the Caribbean, the Dead Man's Chest, is literally the story of this. The legend, Vanderdecken, the captain, is on his way towards the East Indies with the confidence and determination. He tried to steer his ship through the horrid weather conditions of the Cape of the Good Hope, but failed miserably. Even after, of course, vowing to drift until his own demise, you see, he apparently signed a little deal with you-know-who. He swore that he would succeed through the perils of waves even if he had to sail until his judgment day. The devil apparently heard his oath and took him up on it, and now the Dutchman is condemned to stay at sea forever. Legend says that since then, they have been cursed to sail the oceans for eternity. To this day, hundreds of fishermen and sailors from the deep sea have claimed to have even witnessed the Flying Dutchman, continuing its never-ending voyage across never-ending waters. The most famous sightings, I would say, is that of Prince George V of Wales. He was on a 3-year voyage in 1880 with his older brother Prince Albert of Wales and their tutor. The prince's log records say the following for the pre-dawn hours of July 11, 1881 near Australia. Quote, 4 a.m. The Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as a phantom ship glow, which lights the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant as she came up on the port bow, but on arriving there was no vestige or nor any sign whatever of a material ship. Seen right away to the horizon, 13 persons altogether saw her. That's a prince writing, so yeah, that's pretty good source material, I'd say. This is horrific. Imagine a ghost ship faded by red light pulling up towards your ship in the middle of the night, then just cruises on by. Yeah, that'd be the end of me, for sure.